There you go. 4-punch, 5-punch, 6-punch combination. Body shot, bang, 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 bang.
Telling him not to counterpunch.
Boom! Will Rackman get up?
Rolling. Iron. Going through all the instructions. This is for the championship of the world. I expect a tough, clean fight. Protect yourself at all times.
Next episode of the Fight City podcast. My name is Alden Chodash, and I'm being joined by Michael Carbert of the Fight City, our editor-in-chief. How are you tonight, Michael?
I'm doing well, Alden. How are you?
I am doing very well. I was doing a lot better in Saturday until I hit the blackjack table.
Uh-oh.
Lost a little bit of money, but not too much. Not too bad. And it definitely didn't overshadow a great night of fights that me and Josh Izzard covered over at the Hard Rock Casino in Atlantic City. We saw Joe Smith Jr. get his career back on the right track with his big victory over 4-1 favorite Jesse Hart of Philadelphia. Jesse Hart was coming in to try to avenge the loss of his mentor and idol, Bernard Hopkins. Even came into the ring with the executioner mask on him, but did not. Bad idea, and he especially with the way he fought. So he fought like a guy who knew he was in over his head and fighting such a big puncher at light heavyweight in his second fight at light heavyweight. Something that I thought the odds makers should have considered a little more strongly before placing such heavy odds against Joe Smith Jr., who's a huge light heavyweight puncher, a guy that was really the only guy I've ever seen hurt Dimitri Bivol in his fight. And he clearly lost that fight, but he had Bivol hurt. He had Sullivan Barrera on the canvas when Barrera was in his prime. He knocked out Andrew Funfar in a round, a fight that he was a 45-1 underdog in. You know, this is a guy that often falls under the cracks, and stated by him in the coming interview that we'll feature on this show that, you know, he was fighting for his career in this fight. So let's hear Joe Smith's words.
Yeah, I just wanted to keep that pressure, and I knew it.
What were your thoughts about you ended Hopkins' career? You know what the story that he made coming in here. He wanted revenge. Now you got the two Philly guys on your road.
Yeah, I got the two Philly guys, and it feels great. You know, I was hoping to. It would have been nice to get him the same way, but we made it through.
What do you think about this?
Yeah, we can't get everything.
What do you think about the split decision, Joe? What do you think about one of the judges?
Way to work, yo! Way to work,
It's the same thing anybody else could say. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. It's a shame. And you know, if the fight would have went the other way, everybody would have an outcry. But you need an outcry right now that one judge could even score it that way. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace.
Yeah, I was getting a little nervous for a second in there, but I really felt I won the fight. And,
Joe, it seemed like the last couple of rounds, Jesse was really only relying on his left hand, his left hook. Did you notice that, and did you change up your approach in any way?
He was trying to load up on that left hook a lot. I realized that, and I was looking to try to slip under it and catch him with one of my own, but you know, I didn't quite get it there.
Joe, did he fight the way you expected him to fight?
Yeah, you know, he said he was gonna like to get rough with me and come out there. So as soon as the round started, I went to the middle. I was like, I thought you were gonna fight me.
Yeah.
And he's
saw
like,
that.
he just kept it moving.
You might have answered this already, but who are you trying to cut after?
Any one of the champions, I would like, you know.
Relentless, Joe! Relentless!
A lot of big names out there. Yeah. We're going to be searching down, and there's a big fight next week. And, you know, we'll see what pans out from there.
Who's going to win that fight?
It's a good fight. It's a good fight. You know, tune in on ESPN next week, and let's see.
I would like to fight for that title.
Were you surprised that Bernard Hopkins wasn't there to support Jesse, considering the narrative?
Yeah, I mean, they were talking it up a lot. You know, I thought Hopkins would have been here for him, but I see Hopkins got his own going on, so just got
This was a very personal fight for Jesse. We all know that, but was this a personal fight for you at all?
Very personal. You know, my career was on the line here, and I had to come here and prove that I belong.
Okay.
All right, we're back. Those are the words of Joe Smith and also of his manager, Joe DeGuardia, who stated that this was, although a victory for Joe Smith, this was also a near miss in a situation where poor officiating, in this case judging, could have bedeviled not only his career, but just the fairness of the sport. Jim Kinney, his 95-94 score for Jesse Hart was absurd, even by the eyes of Hart's promoter, Bob Arum. Terrible score. A lot of people spoke out against it, as they should. Jesse Hart was not only fighting with one arm, I'm not sure if he was injured, but he was only using really his left hand throughout the fight, and he was running and holding throughout the fight, not really doing anything effective, but for some reason, Kinney found a reason to score for him. I'm hoping your heart didn't drop as much as mine did when Jimmy Lennon Jr. announced split decision, did it?
Well, I've been following boxing for a long time, Alden. I mean, when it comes to bad scorecards, it's pretty hard to shock me. And I think, it's the same for pretty much anyone who writes about boxing, has followed boxing. I mean, it's totally inexplicable, and it's infuriating. But at the same time, it's nothing new. The question is, when are the powers that be going to finally step up and do something about this kind of thing? I mean, it should be cut and dry. I mean, that kind of scorecard, it should disqualify that person from judging at all. He should be done. He should be disgraced. But it will be seen as, he had a bad day at the office, and before you know it, he'll be ringside again. That's the real problem. That's the real outrage. So,
well, it's a sport that in the officiating realm really favors seniority. I mean, we still see Adelaide Byrd getting high-level fights. We see Robert Byrd getting high-level fights despite what he did in the Maurice Blocker fight in Latvia, when he let Bradis get off multiple punches after the bell. I don't want to hold officials to such a standard that they can't make mistakes and disgrace them permanently after it. But when they do impact a fighter's career, his ability to support his family, especially after putting his life on the line, essentially, I think there should be real consequences, and I don't think they should be put into big fights immediately after. I think there should be a proper investigation. I think there's been good examples in the past of such when New York did a state senate investigation of the Lewis Holyfield 1 fight. But I think that should be consistently enforced rather than wait for the biggest times and the most impactful outcomes to spawn this kind of a deep dive into the sport.
Well, I completely agree. And but how? Let's just assume for a moment that the judge in question was bribed. Let's just assume that for a second, okay? We have no grounds to believe that that's the case, but let's just assume that. How are you ever going to prove that? How are you going to what investigation would be effective enough, thorough enough to provide evidence to show that that's the case? I mean, you've got to have a proper system set up whereby there's no conflicts of interest and certain standards, professional standards, are set and adhered to. And then when somebody does do something like this, there's serious consequences. Right now, that's not the case. And, you said, maybe, he had a bad night, he made a mistake. We're not talking one mistake. If you scored, more than a couple rounds, not for Smith Jr., that's you know what I mean? Like we're talking mistake after mistake after mistake. He had to screw up on at least 4, 5, 6 rounds out of that fight.
He had the fight. He gave 6 rounds to Jesse Hart. He gave 6 rounds to Jesse Hart, 95-94 for Hart. Hart was knocked down, so there's the extra point. So
could a serious scorecard give Hart more than 2 rounds? 3 rounds maybe?
Well, unfortunately, I gave Hart 4 rounds, but representing the Fight City.
Okay.
So it was, in my opinion, there were some swing rounds, but there was no doubt that Joe Smith Jr. won the majority of the rounds clearly. I think that's another subtlety when it comes to boxing officiating, is that you could have a shutout scorecard with every round close. However, I don't think this was the case at all here. I think there was at least 6, if not more, clear rounds that I was seeing from my position in the third row of press row that I would give to Joe Smith. I don't know how a ringside judge, granted probably sitting in another position than I was, and only seeing that angle of the ring throughout, another important point, could still see 6 of the 10 rounds going for Hart, given really the lack of initiative to win that fight. He was fighting on the back foot throughout. He didn't look like he was eager to engage. He was fighting with one hand for one reason or another. I'm not sure if it's been reported yet that he was injured going in. He was pointing to his hand after as if he was, but he didn't look like a guy who fought to win the majority of the rounds, and I thought he clearly lost the majority of the rounds. So even though I had it 6-4, I still can't excuse 6-4 the other way.
Okay, well, based on the reports that I've read and the reactions to that scorecard, I mean, it seems pretty clear that Smith Jr. won with plenty of room to spare. Is that safe to say?
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, that's the main point here, and that everyone saw the fight pretty much the same way. So yeah, when a judge turns in a stinker of a scorecard like that, there should be repercussions. I mean, judging. This is the other thing that drives me crazy about these things. In my opinion, judging fights is not rocket science. It's not, you don't have to take a special course to figure out who wins a fight or not. I mean, at the end of the round, which guy would you rather be? I mean,
I mean, there are many cases where there are levels between the fighters, and with the exception of the rounds that a fighter takes off, it's pretty clear who wins the round on that basis. But when a fighter is taking a round off, or when a fight's just that competitive that you have to be keeping track in your head for 3 minutes of the punches landed clean landed punches, any lapse in judgment, if it's a fast-paced fight especially, can cause you to be in catch-up mode and maybe cause you to panic, and you might score a round that everybody sees one way, or everybody thinks goes one way, another way, because there is a lot of pressure on the judges. And of course, that's no excuse, because right here, as you mentioned, this is a repeated blunder. This is getting the just not seeing the nature of the fight unfold, because the nature of the fight was that Joe Smith Jr. was the ring general in all 10 rounds. There were 3 or 4 rounds where he stepped off the gas pedal and wasn't throwing as much, and Jesse Hart was using his jab properly, and he might have stole those rounds, but he still maintained the upper hand throughout. So, things to consider.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a serious issue. If it's very clear that one fighter got the better of the other, and you have an official judge who's paid to do his job, can't see that, it's a serious problem. And of course, what makes it even more serious is that this happens all the time, unfortunately. Now let me ask you a question, Alden. Based on what you saw, and you were watching the fight, I believe, much more carefully than I was, how did Joe Smith Jr. look to you, and what did this fight tell us about whether or not he can rebound a bit and be a threat again at the top level of the light heavyweight division?
Well, I don't think anything really changed. I mean, Joe Smith Jr. is Joe Smith Jr. He's a guy that is probably the second strongest fighter at 175, right behind Beterbiev. This guy is just he's a union laborer. He kind of just hits like an ox, and doesn't really have much fancy skill behind him. But he knows what he's good at, and he just lays into you, and he punishes you to the best of his ability. And he's been able to hurt the highest level boxer in the light heavyweight division, in my opinion, in Dmitry Bivol. So he's a threat to anyone. I mean, even Beterbiev was knocked down by a lesser fighter named Callum Smith. Yes, I think I have his name right. Last year. So, everybody has kinks in their armor, and Joe Smith, he's going to be right in your face to expose them. But based on what you guys heard in the interview that I just played, the most important thing is that this shows the world that he's still alive. He's still in light heavyweight contention. He's still eligible for these big fights, particularly against guys like Eleider Alvarez, who was mentioned as a possible opponent if he gets by his next fight this coming weekend against Michael Seals. Maybe even Jean Pascal, if they can get beyond the whole PBC versus Top Rank issue, or even the champions. Maybe he's a fun fight for Beterbiev. But the point is, his career is still alive, and there's still fun fights to make, and there's some air of uncertainty in him because of the fact that Joe Smith Jr., in my opinion, is the second hardest puncher in the division, and the second strongest fighter in the division. He's a very physical fighter. So he's easy to overlook because he's not a very well-polished fighter, but he doesn't need to be. He doesn't care to be, and he's just Joe Smith, and good for him. I'm happy that he got the benefit of the doubt from 2 of the 3 judges who saw the nature of the fight unfold. Unfortunately, the third judge, Jim Kinney, did not. But at the same time, I think this is getting the kind of notoriety from the levels of the sport who've spoken out on social media, and I commend them for it, that being Al Bernstein and Top Rank promoter and CEO Bob Arum, who is flat out saying this is not an acceptable scorecard, even though it didn't shake up the boxing world because it didn't impact the result. Quite frankly, I think this is the kind of attention that could have been given after the Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler fight, when one judge had Sugar Ray Leonard winning 10 out of 12 rounds. That was completely absurd, but overlooked because of the fact that, well, for a lot of people, the right man won. The comeback kid, the almost 5-year layoff, he won the fight by split decision, Sugar Ray Leonard, but one judge had it 10 rounds to 2 for Leonard, and that kind of just gets soft-shouldered over time. But in this case, it isn't, and I'm happy that it's getting the kind of notoriety that it is. So.
Okay, 1 vote here for Jean Pascal versus Joe Smith Jr. I think that would be an awesome fight. I think that would be potential fight of the year.
Yeah.
So let's
probably both go down.
Let's have, and that would be a matchup between the FightCity.com's Fighter of the Year for 2016, which was Joe Smith Jr., versus the author of the 2019 Upset of the Year. We kind of bucked the trend. Most people were going with Ruiz versus Joshua, and we went with Pascal versus Brown. Great matchup. Can't miss action fight, and of course it's not going to happen. But
well, I mean, I don't know everything about Jean Pascal's relationship with PBC and Heyman. I don't know if there's any ironclad contract there, if he's a free agent to fight where he wants. I'm pretty sure from what you tell me about him that he wouldn't be the one to get in the way of a fight against Joe Smith Jr. He's still willing to fight the best. Even when the odds are against him, and going into his fight against Marcus Brown and even Badu Jack, the odds were definitely stacked against him. Nobody thought he had a chance in hell to beat Marcus Brown, who he did beat and won the upset of the year from the Fight City for that. But against Joe Smith Jr., I think we are looking at a candidate for Fight of the Year in 2020 so far.
Yeah, I think it would be an amazing fight.
Kind of a knockout, drag-out kind of thing, because Joe Smith Jr. has been hurt before, and we know Jean Pascal has, and they both they're battle-tested enough that, I think we would be in for quite a rumble in the 175-pound division, but we'll see what happens. And there's plenty of other fascinating fights for both of them at 175. It's a really hot division. It's a division that I hope doesn't get obstructed by politics. I know that the 2 biggest names at 175 don't have any political hurdles between them, that being Beterbiev with Top Rank and Bivol with DAZN. They should be able to unify potentially later this year once they get around mandatories, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, when it comes to the second tier of light heavyweights, I hope nothing gets in the way of that. But
speaking of light heavyweights, one of the most remarkable achievements, I guess you could say, in the light heavyweight division of recent years would be Andre Ward moving up to 175, getting a rather questionable decision over Sergey Kovalev, but then in the rematch, stopping Kovalev. Ward has since retired, but as I'm sure you've heard, Alden, Sports Illustrated has just named Andre Ward as the fighter of the decade.
Well, what do they know? Did they have a fighter of the decade in 90s and 2000s?
Good question.
Is this their first shot in the boxing realm?
Good question. I have no idea. I do not recall. But as you know, I wrote a rather impassioned piece about who I think should be the fighter of the decade. I personally don't believe there's really much question about it. It should be Roman Gonzalez, Chocolatito. But you know, it's interesting. I mean, we're getting a lot of discussion still about who rightfully should hold that title. Who is the fighter of the decade for the 2010s? What are your thoughts, Alden?
I mean, certainly you brought light to Roman Gonzalez being in contention for that honor. A lot of people are too short-sighted to really see past Roman Gonzalez's shaky end to the 2010s when he was stopped by Srisaket Sorong-Visai. But really, I mean, that was an artifact, if anything, of just being way too heavy or way too small to compete at 115 pounds. I mean, this is a guy that came up from strawweight. He was a minimum weight champion all the way up to 115. And, you know, although those weight differentials don't seem like much, 3-4 pounds in some cases, for guys of that stature, they really mean a lot. And Roman Gonzalez was going up against a lot at 115 pounds, and he still arguably won the first fight against Sorong-Visai, a strong as hell champion. And he won his first appearance at 115 against Quadra. So your case that he fought more often, he fought very good fighters, El Gallo Estrada being one of them, and he unified, he moved up several divisions and won titles. It's definitely true. I mean, Roman Gonzalez did a lot, and he was recognized as the Ring Magazine pound-for-pound fighter of the year pretty unanimously once Floyd Mayweather retired in late 2015. I mean, he was the heir apparent to the throne. Even Floyd Mayweather said it himself. He's the best fighter. The thing is, when Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao were waiting to fight each other for 5 years, Roman Gonzalez was making history, really. I mean, he was representing Nicaragua, carrying the throne from Alexis Arguello, fighting in a tremendous manner against great fighters. It's very easy to overlook guys in that division. And unfortunately for this day and age as a boxing fans, it's very easy to overlook fighters with a loss, especially a knockout loss. And unfortunately, that kind of made people forget about the fact that he was so dominant for the better part of the 2010s. That being said, there were still plenty of other tremendous accomplishments in the 2010s. Andre Ward obviously did a lot in the 2010s. Floyd Mayweather did a lot. You can say the same about Manny Pacquiao. Canelo might be a little bit too young, but these are the kind of mainstream names that you see. So, of course, you're going to get challenged by the diehard fans of these mainstream attractions, why their fighter wasn't considered fighter of the decade. But it certainly opened a discussion that people were not having.
Yeah, well, I'm in a way, I think Sports Illustrated saying that Andre Ward is the fighter of the decade is, on the one hand, kind of laughable, but on the other hand, I welcome it because, as you say, it kind of opens up the discussion more. Because prior to this, I would say most people who are wanting to debate about this and don't feel that Roman Gonzalez deserves it, I would say the vast majority are saying it's Floyd Mayweather's prize. Floyd Mayweather is the fighter of the decade. Some of them no doubt remembering that the previous decade, it was Manny Pacquiao. And Floyd Mayweather was not too happy when he didn't get the fighter of the decade prize, and instead it went to Manny Pacquiao. The problem is that the high-profile prize that's given out is from the Boxing Writers Association of America. I don't know of anyone else other than, say, Sports Illustrated, who's very high-profile and gets a lot of attention, who has a Fighter of the Decade award. And so what's a bit disturbing is that the BWAA, they've got their nominations out for Fighter of the Decade. Well, Roman Gonzalez isn't even a nominee. And instead, Vladimir Klitschko is. Figure that one out, you know.
Yeah. I mean, Vladimir Klitschko would be there for some of the same reasons that Roman Gonzalez. I mean, you could think of some similarities between the two, actually, in the sense that they were so dominant that people forgot about them until they lost. And then people were quick to cast them out. But at the same time, Roman Gonzalez was doing it in a much more skillful manner, multiple divisions against very, very good fighters, and not, Bryant Jennings, for example. So that's the counterpoint. But again, that's the discussion.
Well, Klitschko, you could argue, at least much of his accomplishments came in the last decade, the previous decade. But I mean, yeah, you can make a case. There's some achievements there, no question. But I don't think he had a decade to stack up to any of the other nominees. And again, the fact that Roman Gonzalez is not a nominee, as far as the Boxing Writers of America are concerned, I think that's a huge oversight. So, I mean, I'm glad in a way that Andre Ward is now being named the Fighter of the Decade, because it just on the one hand, it shows how these awards are always kind of preposterous to begin with, but also that, it widens the field. There's more to debate, more to discuss, and there's valid cases that can be made for a number of fighters. So that's all to the good. But yeah, I as I made clear in my essay, I think that it's an airtight case. Chocolatito is really the guy who achieved more than any other professional prize fighter in the past 10 years.
So we had Chocolatito as the Fight City's Fighter of the Decade. For Fighter of the Year, we had Naoya Inoue, who is really making a huge wave for himself in the lower weight divisions, very similar to how Chocolatito was. I mean, it's a little bit bigger, but not much. I mean, his first title was at 108 pounds, if I'm not mistaken, and he's just carries his power and his size and his presence a lot better than Chocolatito in these higher weight divisions. I'm talking 115 and 118. He was also the winner of the Fight of the Year against Nonito Donaire, a thrilling fight. So I guess we'll shift the conversation over to Naoya Inoue and what case he's making as a potential all-time great in years coming.
Well, I feel that we got it right. I feel that Inoue is the Fighter of the Year. I know that most are picking Canelo Alvarez, and there's definitely a strong case that can be made for Canelo. But I see something really interesting happening. I mean, in a way, this redeems a decision we made several years back. In 2014, Inoue was our Fighter of the Year, and we got a little bit of flack for that. I mean, at that point in time, a lot of people hadn't even heard of this guy.
Yeah.
So this is the second time that Inoue has been the Fight City's Fighter of the Year. And if you look back over 5 years now, I mean, Inoue is on his way. He's not maybe quite there yet, but he's on his way to establishing himself as a legitimate all-time great fighter. And And this past year would be seen as a huge step forward in that campaign. Now, the frustrating thing is all of our Fighter of the Year nominees only fought twice. Everybody, it's like the 2-fight club. Nobody fights more than twice. So in a way, all you had to do to decide who you liked as Fighter of the Year was decide, okay, whose 2 wins were the most impressive or most significant against another guy's 2 wins. And what I liked about Inoue's 2 wins is the first win was an absolute dominant performance, a blowout, against a undefeated title holder. Inoue just demolished him. He was too good. And it's not just power with Inoue, it's also skill, his technical skill. And then the second win was something altogether different. It was an absolute war, everybody's fight of the year against Nonito Donaire. And what is particularly significant, in my opinion, and in the opinion of Neil Crane, who wrote the article for us, what is particularly significant is the fact that Inoue had to overcome some serious adversity to secure that win. Not only did Nonito Donaire give one of the best performances of his career in that fight, but he also landed a huge left hook in the second round that sliced open Inoue's eye, and then we found out after the fight fractured Inoue's orbital bone. So Inoue fought for 10 rounds in a hellacious battle, a slugfest. He fought 10 rounds with a fractured orbital bone. I mean, I don't think enough is being made of this. I mean, that's a heroic feat. If much is made of Muhammad Ali allegedly going 10 rounds with a broken jaw against Ken Norton back in 1973. Well, this is on the same scale. This is on the same level, I think. And in Ali's case, he lost. Well, in Inoue's case, he won. So I think it's everyone's, or I would say most people's fight of the year, Inoue versus Donaire. And when you really take a close look at the fight and how it unfolded, I mean, you've got to tip your hat to Inoue. I mean, the monster really showed us something significant in that fight.
It was the first time he was tested in that manner.
Yes.
And the thing that people overlook is the fact that, well, actually, not as many people overlook it as I would have imagined, because Donaire fought so well. He showed us glimpses of the Nonito Donaire back in 2012 that scored a fearsome knockout over Fernando Montiel at that same weight, bantamweight. He used that same left hook to turn Fernando Montiel into Simon Brown versus Vincent Pettaway. Right. Knocked out, punching, thinking he was still in the fight while he was on the canvas. I mean, that kind of a fearsome knockout with that same shot. You had Inoue walk through, suffer a broken orbital, and you could probably see why, because Donaire is just that vicious of a puncher at that weight, and he showed, even despite some shaky losses in the interim since that fight at higher weights, when he is back down at 118, taking things seriously, he is a force to be reckoned with. And he was definitely no slouch against Inoue. He was just he was someone that brought the best out of Inoue, and he's someone that could beat most anybody else at 118 pounds. Not a fighter that was coming off a fluke over Ryan Burnett, as many thought was the case. You know, this is a serious, very impressive victory for Inoue. So in that sense, the case for Inoue is bolstered. But, you know, we also had a very strong year by Canelo Alvarez. The one fighter that I think should have gotten at least one award, and I know I fought for him a little bit for Fight of the Year, was Josh Taylor. I thought his fight against Regis Prograis was the best fight of the year because of pure competition and pure the number of momentum swings. It didn't have as much drama as Nonito Donaire versus Naoya Inoue because there wasn't a knockdown. Neither fighter was seriously hurt, but it did feel like Inoue was comfortably ahead and was headed towards a victory for much of the fight against Donaire. It seemed like 117-111 was an appropriate scorecard, whereas with Josh Taylor and Regis Prograis, these two were constantly shifting momentum. Whose fight at such a high level skill-wise, and Josh Taylor came out with the victory. And very recently, he just signed with Top Rank, which means that we could be looking at a unification for all 4 belts at 140 pounds with Jose Ramirez later this year. A phenomenal fight and a very good move on Josh Taylor's part if he can get out of legal hurdles with his previous matchmaker and promoter. And live happily ever after with Top Rank, because at 140, that is Top Rank's division. No PBC negative influence there. And not only that, at 140, we're looking at the rise of Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney in the near future, because these are 2 lightweights that really shouldn't be lightweights and are probably headed towards 140 pounds sooner than later once they fight Lomachenko or what have you. So I think Josh Taylor, if he decides to stay at 140, which I really think he should, he might be looking at some year-end awards in years to come. I know he was a bit of a near miss for this year, but I think someone to really look out for.
Absolutely, and I agree with you 100%. And Taylor got some very strong consideration from me personally, but it goes back to the activity level. I mean, Taylor was nominated for Fighter of the Year, but all these guys, they only fought twice. Yep. I mean, we need guys to step up. You want to be Fighter of the Year, you got to step up. And if you're only going to fight 2 or 3 times a year, then you got to really make those 2 or 3 fights count. And what I would like to see is sooner than later is Taylor Prograis 2. I mean, that was a fantastic fight. Why not run it again? I mean, it doesn't make sense really to have Inoue Donaire 2. I mean, Donaire, let's face it, he's nearing the sunset. But Taylor Prograis, I mean, why couldn't that be? Why couldn't we have a chapter 2, a chapter 3? Why couldn't that be?
Boxing's changed though. I mean, it's not really a rematch friendly sport as it once was. Not really that long ago either. I mean, when Jermaine Taylor beat Bernard Hopkins in 2005, there was an immediate rematch after that. Now the only immediate rematches we see are the ones that are dictated in the contract, like Andy Ruiz versus Joshua 2. Top Rank CEO Bob Arum has spoken out against the lack of public demand for rematches. Their promotional firm is not huge on rematches, is his words years back.
I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong. Come on. I agree with you. Taylor versus Prograis was one of the best fights of the year. Are you telling me that if they didn't run it back within the next 6 months, it wouldn't be even bigger? I think it would be, because everybody would be thinking about the first fight. And how is that a bad career move? Win or lose, it's not a bad career move for either fighter. Because we've got to get fighters to look at the bigger picture and be a little more ambitious, and for the good of their careers and for the sport. And if I have any say in Josh Taylor's career, I'm penciling that fight in. We give Prograis a rematch. That's a huge money fight. That's a major event. Why not? What's the case against it?
Well, first, Josh Taylor has a mandatory mandated by the WBA in the near future. According to Dan Raphael of ESPN, I got a chance to speak with him briefly. So I guess he might not be able to get around that if he has ambitions of being a unified 140-pound champion, not get stripped of one of his belts. Also, I mean, the first fight was very physical. Both guys took a tremendous amount of punishment. So, Regis Prograis is just getting back into the swing of things. So, we'd have to see his timetable and whether or not he wants to immediately go into a rematch. Because a second loss in this day and age, unfortunately, is not a good position for a lot of fighters to be in. So there's no guarantee that Prograis would want to step in there right away. And the risk for Josh Taylor's there is that, he has 3 out of the 4 belts at 140. Not an easy feat to come by in this day and age. And while he just signed with Top Rank, he'd be risking all 3 of those and a chance to unify all 4 against Top Rank's Jose Ramirez later this year. I hope that fight gets made. So that's just the present thinking of a lot of fighters, and all this to consider. that gets in the way of rematches in a way that wasn't the case years back. I guess it's just the culture, the millennial culture. I could blame it on to some extent. We're kind of thinking for immediate gratification, and seeing the same thing a second time is not necessarily immediate gratification in terms of going forward. And the next big thing, we want to see the next mesh of styles facing off. We can watch on YouTube anytime we want the first fight, but when are we going to see something new? That's probably why you don't see the same level of excitement for a Triple G Canelo 3, that kind of a rematch.
Oh my God!
Because there are top level boxing experts out there that aren't excited for it, and there's several. And nobody's saying it wouldn't be a great fight. It's just we've seen 24 rounds of it.
Well, it boggles the mind. I mean that second fight between Canelo and Golovkin, that's one of the best fights of the last several years.
Yeah.
I don't see how anybody can dispute that. Why wouldn't you want to see a third fight between these two premier elite athletes while they're still, in their prime?
That's the argument, though, is the decline of, the struggle that Triple G had against Sergey Derevyanchenko, a very, very close fight, a fight I thought he lost. For Canelo fans and just general boxing fans, they see that as why take the third fight? This is a fighter that he's going to be a much bigger underdog going into the third fight than he ever was before. I don't think he had ever been an underdog against Canelo, and people view it as a foregone conclusion and kind of a distraction from what Canelo's goal is to be.
Really?
Yeah.
Then why doesn't Canelo take the fight? I mean, I got a little.
He thinks he thinks he could make more money fighting guys like Callum Smith, the Ring Magazine 168-pound champion.
That's bullshit. That's bullshit. If he fights Golovkin again, that will be the biggest payday of his career. DAZN wants that fight. Everybody wants that fight.
They do want that fight.
What?
They do want that fight. Yep.
Yeah. It'll be the biggest payday of Canelo's career, and he's created a very good bargaining position for himself. I mean, come on. I don't get this. We don't need to see it. Oh, of course, Canelo would win. Oh, it's a foregone conclusion.
So Canelo, he is an attraction in the boxing world in this day and age. People don't see him to watch great competition as much as they would other fighters. He's viewed as, let's watch Canelo. He's the most talented fighter in the sport. That's how a lot of people view him, just as an attraction. Let's see him make history against Sergey Kovalev. Let's see him make history against super middleweight fighter. Let's see him go up to cruiserweight. Let's watch the Canelo show. Let's not put him in against the toughest opposition. Because it doesn't matter to him. People want to see him as an attraction more than they want to see him tested, and that's just the superficial culture in our sport that hinders some of these great fights from taking place. Unfortunately, it's driving a bit of a disconnect and a lot of controversy with how fighters should manage their careers. That's just what I see.
Well, all I got to say about that is we need to see the top fighters in this sport fight more than 2 times a year. So
we do. And we need to see them fight the best fighters in their division, like we saw in many cases in 2019. The best fights of 2019 were when the best fought the best, often in unification fights. I'm talking Beterbiev versus Vazdik. I'm talking about Taylor versus Prograis. I'm talking about Donaire versus Inoue. There's no coincidence that all these fight of the year candidates that we have, and I can go through the list if you want, most of them are unifications or clearly the 2 best fighters in the division.
Thank God for the World Boxing Super Series.
Which a lot of fighters and managers have, it's no foregone conclusion that every fighter in the division is going to be in that. I mean, hell, even Lucien Butte wasn't in the original World Boxing Super Series at 168, unfortunately. You can't catch them all, I guess, but Earl Spence versus Sean Porter being another example. We need to see the unifications. There's no doubt. That's the best fights.
Absolutely. Well, people forget. There's a reason. I mean, this goes back, more than a century now. There's a reason why you have a champion, and then you have rankings which determine who the top contenders are. The reason you have that mechanism in place is it's supposed to ensure healthy, cutthroat competition. The best fighting the best on a frequent basis, on a regular basis. And the best fighters, they get the biggest paydays because, of course, they're taking the biggest risks, and they're engaging in the fights that the people really want to see and are willing to put their money down to see. I mean, that's how it's supposed to work. So, yeah, 21st century boxing, it's a bit of a disappointment in so many ways. But despite that, as you say, we saw some great fights in 2019, and here's hoping the World Boxing Super Series keeps going, and here's hoping we see some more great fights in 2020.
Yeah, I definitely hope so. Speaking of nostalgia, I got a chance to sit down with former trainer of Sugar Ray Leonard, Lennox Lewis, Simon Brown, and Maurice Blocker, all four legendary champions. Pepe Correa, he trains out of the...
Good for you, Alden.
Why, thank you.
Oh, that's a coup. That's a coup. You got an interview with one of the premier trainers of the last few decades.
He is a DC local. He trains young boxers out of Sugar Ray Leonard Boxing Gym, where he originally trained Sugar Ray Leonard more or less from the very start. He even trained Sugar Ray Leonard's brother, Roger Leonard, who he actually claims was more talented than Ray, coincidentally.
Wow.
More to come in a later article that I'll publish a little bit later on about the historical take that he gave us on many fighters' careers, including Lennox Lewis, including Simon Brown, and some little-known facts about Sugar Ray Leonard. But we'll shift gears to my interview with him on when he talks about the present day and his takes on what has changed over the years in the sport. Let's shift to the current day and age. What are some of the big differences you see in the fight game today as opposed to back when Sugar Ray Leonard was on top of the sport in the 80s?
The big difference today, those kids are getting a whole lot of money that they don't deserve, and they're pushing them too fast. Back when, you had guys that stayed around 100, 200 fights, and these are professionals. And I was looking something on the internet this morning, how many fights different guys had, including the run, Archie Moore, 200 and all that kind of stuff. Today, they rush them in there for that money. Yeah, the money's big, but they move them wrong. If you move a guy properly, he's gonna stay around and win a whole bunch of titles, not just a couple $1 million get knocked and come back and get knocked off by some bum. Too much money involved, and give him too much money up front. I don't care how much you pay him. You can pay him $30 million. I don't care about that. But in the start of a guy's career, don't give him all that money, because then he gets to the point he don't want to listen to the trainers. He's the boss. He wants to run stuff. And like I tell any guy in the gym, any fight I ever work with, if you're going to run business, you don't want me. Guys say one time, man, Ray Leonard's going to fire you, man, the way you talk to him. I say, so be it. Because that's the way I used to talk to him sometimes. What the fuck I asked you to do? You do this. I asked you to do that. And he'd go out and do that. I know J.D. Brown said one time, man, Ray going to fire you. I said, I don't care. I'm not going to kiss ass. I came here to get him ready for a fight. I came to give him what I had in my head, and I had plenty. Because not only did Ray Leonard sit down and watch tapes and learn from stuff, believe it or not, I did too.
Who did, sir?
I also learned. When I watch a Ray Robinson, okay, when I watch Archie Moore and those guys, I learned something too.
Did you also, in today's fight game, if we were to go 20 years from now, who do you think is going to leave the biggest lasting impression for people of future generations?
Andre Ward. Andre Ward. Andre Ward, here's a fighter, undefeated, retired undefeated, could adapt to anything that you do in the ring. this boy was something. Andre Ward was nothing but the truth. He could adapt to anything that you put in front of him. Look at this guy. I mean, stay behind the jab, know when to go to the body. He could come inside and fight you, could stay outside and fight you, but he was smart, always smart. Don't take anything away from Roberto Duran. Smart as hell. Take nothing away better not take nothing from Ray Leonard. Speed and power. Movement. Okay? A lot of guys want to stand and bang these days. You don't bang with a banger. And he learned that when he fought Duran the first time. And after that, you never saw him bang with anyone.
Who do you think the best pound for pound fighter in the world today is?
Pound for pound?
Yeah.
I like that young Mexican.
Canelo Alvarez?
Canelo. I love him as a fighter. Now, there's one more fighter. I can't think of his name right now. That little young Russian that come out of there. He's mean.
Beterbiev?
Yeah, no, the other one. The Russian kid. I can't think of his name right now. I'll tell you something else.
Lomachenko?
Yes, yes, Lomachenko.
Ukrainian.
Terrence, yeah, Ukrainian. Okay, Terrence Crawford, a beast. Terrence Crawford is a beast. Now, I do not want to see he and Lomachenko hook up because somebody gets hurt in that fight real bad.
Yeah. So, in terms of Terrence Crawford, Lomachenko, Canelo Alvarez, is there some flashback, deja vu that you see when you look at their styles and what you think they might have emulated over the years?
Terrence Crawford, that's a Ray Leonard. He just don't have the speed as a Ray, but he has the power of Ray Leonard. Lomachenko, you can tell he had a lot of amateur fights because he brings that to the table.
397 amateur.
He is the sweetest fighter I've seen in my life. And he breaks you down. He breaks you down round by round. He know how to break you down. Okay?
So what are you looking forward to the most in the coming year? Is there any fight or any event that you're really looking forward to?
What I would like to see people do in the coming years is to get kids in gyms and train them from A, B, C, right on down the line. If a kid don't know how to step with a jab, you don't let him get in the ring. If a kid don't know how to throw a right hand or left hook, you don't get him in the ring. These days, they're rushing these kids. And I don't mind saying this. You got a lot of fighters, right? A lot of trainers here in the world today. Even in this gym here, I couldn't teach a dog to piss on a tree. And that's bad. So, therefore, you have to have somebody to train the trainers. When I was in California, all the guys that I had out there, I trained my own trainers. And that's why those guys went so far. Because if it was my way or the highway. You know, a lot of guys say, I was pushy. No, I wasn't pushy. If you had a guy and he had his foot all turned all stupid, you know, and didn't know how to step properly with his jab, you don't need to be a trainer. So I had some
favors. There's a lot of talk that Deontay Wilder is up on the list of the greatest heavyweight punchers in history. Where do you rank him?
I don't rank him nowhere near no damn Ernie Shavers. I don't rank him near Joe Louis. He's too wild. He's a slap. Can he punch? Yes, but he's a slapper.
Oh yeah.
You know, everything coming from left field. You don't know where the hell they're coming from. Now, his trainer was a better boxer than he is.
Mark Breland?
Mark Breland was a hell of a fighter, man. And Wilder just come along at the right time. A big boy got power and lucky. The Cuban who fought him, had the Cuban get jumped dead on him, he had him. But if you're not in shape, you can't jump on the guy. He wasn't in shape, and I could see that. Look at Ruiz, who just fought the guy from England.
Yeah.
He was not in shape.
Oh, yeah.
He way overweight. Why? Because they gave him too much money. He wanted to be the man, and he admitted it to myself that he said, "Man, I messed up." He said, "I should have listened. I should have not tried to train myself." You can't run your camp.
I expect a tough, clean fight. Protect yourself at all times. Any questions from the challenger?